Good morning. Happy Sunday, or happy Saturday night, wherever in the world you may be. So, this morning I would like to talk about my journey, my own personal journey in collapsing the relationship, the old relationship paradigm that I was born into, that I was conditioned to marry into, and all of that jazz, right? Hey Ainsley, good morning. Welcome back. So good to have you back on Aussie land. Hey Khan, if you're jumping on or you're watching the replay, drop a little hello, drop an emoji, drop something. Let me know you're here. I always like to connect with those that are here, or acknowledge those that are here at least. So, wow, this is such a really, it's such a big topic, right? For me, at least, it has been quite a fascinating journey of transformation, a dissolving of the wounded ego, a dissolving of the wounded feminine and wounded masculine energy that I have often found myself in growing up, right? And so I'm going to do my best to clearly communicate what my experiences have been on this journey, but also how it's all unfolded. And, I think growing up as a Greek girl, like some Cypriot, a Cypriot Greek girl, in that family dynamic, in that cultural conditioning, added just another layer to me trying to dissolve this paradigm. In fact, I had to dissolve through that first before I actually got to, you dissolving the traditional style relationships. So it's been quite an unraveling. I had to learn how to break out of, in a lot of European cultures, and especially back a few decades ago, even up until, the 80s, 90s, probably even still now, in those cultures, the woman, the girl, is meant to be a certain way. Yeah, she's meant to dress a certain way. She's meant to be a certain way. She's meant to speak a certain way. And unfortunately for my parents, they could control that up until a certain age, right? But then after that, I had a mind of my own. I had a voice of my own. I was constantly getting into trouble because I was not fitting into the constraints or the construct that they wanted me to fit into. I didn't want to wear the shiny leather shoes. I didn't want to wear, your traditional good girl clothing. I didn't want to be that person. I wasn't that person, so I fought it. And I'd often get into quite a lot of trouble for it, right? Until I decided to live a double life, right? This is what I decided at a young age, that I was going to be a certain way at home and I was going to be a certain way with my friends. And that's what I did, because I was like, okay, how am I going to, and it's quite fascinating, we're quite clever, right? At a young age, I was like, how am I going to really make this work for me? Because I was constantly being judged and criticized, and and it's not, I'm not trying to blame my parents. They were just doing what they knew how to do, and they were raising me how they were raised. They were trying to do better than what their parents did, and they did do better than what their parents did. But again, each generation is a new energy, it's a new dynamic. It wants to be freer and expand more. Anyway, so I started living this double life, and I knew it. I knew my mum was onto me. My dad I think my dad knew what was going on, but he just didn't say anything. There were times where he would say stuff, but I kind of played it pretty chill around them, so that I could keep the peace, because I just wanted to make everyone happy. But I also wanted my freedom and independence, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do, right? So regardless of my rebellious energy, I still fell into this construct of, you know, getting a job, buying a house, finding a boy, falling in love, getting married, having the kids. I fell into that, okay? And when I was in that construct, there were times where it was really beautiful, but there were times where I was very repressed, okay? And I didn't like that. And I didn't feel free. I felt even more repressed than what I felt when I was a child. And so for me, a big part of breaking out of that was ending my marriage. Hey, Brooke. Hey, John. Hey, Sue. Hey, Lauren. Hey, everyone. So, you know, I decided to end my marriage because I changed, right? I went through a dark night of the soul after I got sick with Bell's palsy, and that went on for years. This dark night of the soul went on for years, and I changed, and I knew that I had to leave my marriage, and that was the beginning of it. That was the beginning. And when I left, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, it was brutal, right? The undoing of the paradigm, the collapsing of the paradigm is brutal. It is so brutal that you go through these stages of feeling free, then you have mental turmoil, then you doubt yourself, then you validate yourself because you're like, yeah, I made the right decision, and then you beat yourself up again, and you go through this vicious cycle of confidence and then doubt and then certainty and then mental turmoil, and like it's constant, right? Until this paradigm collapses and you're free from it. But there's many, many layers to it, and it takes a lot of courage to actually work your way through it, right? And you're going to piss a lot of people off on your way as well. But you just have to keep going. And a lot of people will come and go into your life, but they're all coming in to help you collapse this paradigm, right? And that's been my experience at least. And so after that, I had to then really look at how I was relating, how I was showing up in relationships. And, you know, there were relationships that I fell in love with these men, and I went through these brutal cycles of still in the paradigm, the relationship paradigm, right? Still not realizing that I was playing out, pardon me, that same dynamic, and being left heartbroken. And tapping into my limiting beliefs of being abandoned and being neglected and not feeling special and not feeling important enough and not being heard or seen or validated. All these stories and beliefs started coming up for me to clear. And some of them were so brutal, right? But it was all showing up for my growth, right? And my expansion. So just give me 1 second. Let me show you where I am, if you can see. Oh, hang on. So I'm just sitting in front of this wall, but just beyond this wall here is the bay here. And there's the Spirit of Tasmania over there. So anyway, the more I healed my inner child, which, you know, you hear me talking about this all the time, the more I healed my inner child, the more the paradigm collapsed. Right? Because it's my inner child that has been conditioned to seek out these types of traditional relationships, right? And it was through her, it was through healing her and choosing myself that the paradigm collapsed more and more, right? Because we're so conditioned to seek out love, to seek out validation, to seek out attention outside of ourselves, that we are neglecting ourselves. And when we want that, when we want love, when we want attention, when we want validation, it's our soul calling us to deeply connect with us, to give it to ourselves. Yeah? Hey, Lucia. Hey, Douglas. Hey, Julie. Right? And that has been a learning, a constant learning over and over and over again, you know? And I think when you get to this kind of final place where you're like, yeah, I don't want the traditional style relationship. Like for some people that works. and that's amazing, and it works beautifully. But for other people, that traditional style relationship, it doesn't work anymore. You know, we've become these independent people, and we want our own space, and we want to be free in a relationship. We want to be respected and honored and individual and separate but together, right? So there's all these things that are starting to show up, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. No, I don't want that one. Yeah, I want that. Yeah, I like that. I don't want that. Right? So I'm kind of like, it's almost like we need new titles, right? Because these old words like relationship and dating and friends with benefits and whatever they are, right? Whatever the titles are, boyfriend, girlfriend, it's like they're old. There's old energy in them. And it's almost like perhaps it would benefit us not to label what it is that we're doing, or perhaps it would benefit us to come up with new words, yeah? Like empowering words. Words that actually describe what we're doing with each other, right? Words that describe where we're heading and where we want to go, right? So recently, right, as I've continued, as I've journeyed through relating with men and my children and my friendships, I'm still trying to collapse this paradigm, this old paradigm. And recently I've had a really, really profound experience, right? Last year I had probably quite a big pillar collapse. Last year I had an experience with a man where I realized what he activated this deep, deep healing within me, this deep transformation, which was very painful for my wounded ego, right? But it made me realize that how I was projecting in relationships, how I was trying to prove my beliefs right. And I carried this belief, right? I carried this belief my whole life that I created as a child. And this is why the inner child healing is really important. Because when you tap into your limiting beliefs, you can change them. Yeah? And you can become a more empowered and evolved person. So my limiting belief was that I had to prove to people that I deserved their love. Okay, this is a belief I created as a child. This is a core belief I created. And so because I had this belief that I had to prove to people that I deserved their love, it meant that I was doing all of the work in the relationships. I was doing all this work in my relationships with my parents, with my friends, with my lovers, my husband, my children. Like, I was doing all of the work, and that is exhausting. Right? So when things would go pear-shaped, I would be the one like getting my tools out trying to fix it alone. And I found this was a common theme in my relationships with men. And last year I realized I tapped into this core belief and I collapsed it. And when you collapse a core belief, what happens is your whole reality starts to shift. And that takes a little bit of time. So when that core belief collapses and you have all these realizations, it's like you're a deer standing in headlights, and you think about everything that has ever happened in relationships flashes before your eyes, and you're like, oh my God, this is how I contributed to that. This is how I pushed this person away. This is how I got rejected here. This is how I was, and it's full on, because you're like, wow, that's really, there's shame. There's a lot of shame that comes up, right? You're like, I can't believe I showed up like that. I can't believe I used to do that. But it's in those moments where you have these deep realizations that can be brutal, where you need to show yourself a lot of love and compassion. And that's the hard part, because we're so conditioned to beat ourselves up. But it's in those moments where you have to go, it's okay. It's all right. You didn't know. It was unconscious. It was all unconscious. I was not consciously doing it. I wasn't even aware of it, right? I wasn't aware of how I was showing up. But the little girl in me decided that that was what I needed to do, I needed to prove to people that I deserved their love, right? And so we have these core beliefs that I call pillars that we stand on. These core beliefs that sit in our unconscious, that drive our vehicle that we move through life in. And so it's really important for you to tap into what your core beliefs are. And it's only when you tap into your core beliefs that you can collapse those pillars and you can start building new pillars for you to stand on, healthy pillars, right? And that's the job for us when we become adults. Because when we become adults, you know, the way we've been doing things maybe has worked up until our 30s, 35, and then we start getting a bit tired and we're like, oh, things are going to be pear-shaped here. What's going on? I'm not really liking the way this is happening or that's happening. And then we start to struggle and suffer because we're not evolving and changing. All right. And so we need to do these emotional detoxes so we can tap into our core beliefs, because our core beliefs are constantly trying to prove themselves right. Yeah. Does that make sense to everyone? Hey, Michelle. Hey, Chris, Mary, Kim. Hey, Konstantinos, Stacy, Ben. So it's really important to figure out what your beliefs are. If you want to have a life you've never had before, if you want to have a relationship, this was the thing for me. I'm like, I've always dreamed about having this type of relationship or these types of experiences with men. And if I want that, then I'm going to have to do things I've never done before. I'm going to have to really take a good hard look at myself as how I'm showing up, what my expectations are, how I'm projecting, and it's hard, right? It's not easy. So the journey continued, right? And I started to realize how I was showing up in the old way. And as my ego dissolved, my wounded ego dissolved, and I stopped seeking validation, and I realized the repetitive pattern that I would have with men. Then I started to change the way I was showing up, because everyone's a reflection of you, right? And all of these men who would repeat the cycle, well, they all had one thing in common, which was me, right? And that can be hard to look at, but you have to, because it's like, well, how am I showing up? How am I manifesting this? And it always comes back to your core beliefs. So anyway, moving along, right? This year or last year, continuing to connect with men and having these experiences and realizing, you know what's really interesting? When you are teaching stuff, right? So in my job, in my role, I'm helping people tap into their core beliefs. I'm helping people collapse things and, you know, teaching them how to connect in an empowered way. I go through that. The universe is like, oh, you want to teach this stuff now? Here we go. Let's throw some of this stuff your way and see how you're going to handle it. And it's good because I go into it and I figure out how to navigate my way through it. It's almost like research, right? I figure out how I'm going to navigate my way through it, and then I share it with you guys and I share it with my clients. And it's kind of like the only way to do it. You can't learn this stuff in a book, right? You've got to journey through it. And as you journey through it, you know, you need help too. So coaches need coaches. And I was with my friend Michael the other day on Friday. And it was really interesting because I had a meeting with him in a gym. Yeah. He transforms bodies. He's this beautiful, sweet soul in this big Hercules body, right? And anyway, and so I went to go see him and we're working on some stuff together, and he coaches me sometimes, right? And I'm so grateful for him, because we're kind of on the same level when it comes to following our dreams and daily practices and how we are and our wisdom and all that. We're kind of on the same page, and I honor him because he's pulled me out. It was like coming up for air speaking to him, right? And what was really important for me on that day with him was what has unfolded in me trying to collapse my paradigm with the relationship paradigm and how I want to show up with men, right? And I can sit with him and I can talk to him about anything. And I can say, Michael, I'm having these experiences over and over again. Why am I having them? Why am I having this? Why am I doing that? And he's just like, it's because It's because you got a block there. It's because you're doing this. It's because, and he's in tune. He's like, you're disappointed at that, and you're and he's like, I can feel it, and right? And so he talks to me like that, and he's brutally honest. And I respect that because that's how I'm going to change, right? By taking a good hard look at myself and how I'm showing up. So let me just backtrack a bit. So as I continue to dissolve this relationship paradigm, which has been probably the hardest thing yet, I've decided, and I decided this last year, that I'm not going to continue to do things the way I used to do things. So let me give you an example what I mean by that. So a lot of the times when we meet someone new and we connect and we're going through the talking stage and the flirting stage, there's all these green flags. Like, oh, this is really good. He's texting me all the time. I got a morning message. Yeah, he's thinking of me in the morning. And, we had a date and everything's progressing nicely. Okay. And you tell your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's amazing. Wow, he sounds great. He sounds great. Can't wait to see what's going to unfold here, right? But let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say you meet someone, right? And you go through a talking stage, but there's not constant communication, or you haven't gone on a date yet, or when they do speak to you, it's amazing, but when you're not speaking, or when there's days between how often you communicate, you go into, oh, this isn't right, or this feels off, or that's a red flag, or this is right. So you start going into, there's something wrong here. Okay, so this is where we get tested. There's something wrong here. That's not how I like things, or that's not how, right? Because the ego, the wounded ego, wants approval, wants validation, wants confirmation that things are progressing in the right way, that there's consistency, and this is what I'm learning. I'm learning that traditionally, that's what I wanted too. I wanted consistency, because then I could trust you. If you keep showing up the same way consistently, then I can trust you. But that's still me needing something from the other person to feel safe. And that's not right. This is how unhealthy attachments are formed, okay? So I really learned that in the last couple of weeks, right? And I'm like, shit, I don't want to do that. I need to collapse that. Now, so you're doing this with this person, and then you tell your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and they're like, mate, this chick's seeing other guys. This is a red flag. If she's not texting you, she's texting other guys, or she's probably got 10 guys she's talking to. And then you're like, oh my God, yes, this isn't good. This is not right. Right? So you probably pull away, or you end it and you cut it off. That's what I used to do. And I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. I was telling my friend last night, I'm like, I'm not cutting people off anymore. I'm not doing things the way that I used to do things anymore, because I want something I've never had before, right? And I've had the guys who have come in and communicated consistently and every day and chased me and given me all the attention I've wanted, and terms of endearment and sweet talking and all of that stuff. And it all ended very painfully for me, right? So I'm like, where that's nice, it's nice to hear from someone consistently, or have that lustful experience. I don't want that anymore. That's not what I want. So then I have to allow my wounded ego to dissolve this idea or this concept that it has to show up a certain way. Okay? I have to let that go. I have to let that collapse. So what happens is, when you're doing that, there's all this mental turmoil that comes in. The old you is like, remember this? Remember that? Remember that you Remember that last time this happened, right? Because someone not messaging you all the time, or someone, oh, this is what it is for me. What would happen is these men would come in and they'd communicate consistently, giving you all this attention, affection, blah, 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 blah. And then after a few months, it slowly starts to dissolve. Whoops, right? Slowly starts to fade. So what happens is they slowly stop messaging. And then there's days between messages when they used to message every day or whatever it was. And slowly that starts to fade into weeks or whatever it is. And then it just ends, right? So when there's a similar experience to that, the wounded ego goes, red flag. This is like what happened with that guy, remember? Red flag. He used to communicate like that too, remember? Red flag. Okay, so you have all this mental turmoil. And it's really hard. And this is the bit where you've really got to support yourself. And you've got to be like, no, this is different. I'm not doing what I did before. We're not in a relationship. We're not dating. I'm not attached. I'm not getting emotionally attached to this person. I'm getting to know someone, okay? So this is what it's like when you are collapsing the relationship paradigm. Sarah's saying our mind is full of shit. It is full of shit, right? And so what we're doing is we're projecting the old stuff into the present moment, and we're potentially going to damage something really beautiful that hasn't even begun yet. Okay? And so this is why I keep saying over and over again, it takes a really long time to get to know someone, so get to know them. Get to know them first, right? And if that doesn't look the way you think it should look in your head, well, work through that. Work through your triggers, work through your wounded ego, right? And it's really hard, okay? I'm not going to lie. It's really hard because we are conditioned a certain way and we create these expectations, right? But it's not a very healthy, empowered way to relate to people, okay? So, sorry, I hope I'm saying your name right, Sarah. Sarah's saying, are you more avoid? So I think I used to be avoidant. I think I used to, I would, like I used to, when men would come in and they'd want the full-blown commitment, I would pull away and become avoidant. But I think now I'm more expressive and open to that, right? So if men come in and that's what they want, Sarah with a H, okay, sorry. So if men come in and they want the full-blown relationship commitment, I'm just like, I can't commit to that. I use my voice now. I'm like, if I had met you a year ago, 100%, I'd be all in with that. But right now, that's not what I'm moving towards, right? And there's a lot of people who want that. And last year I connected with this really beautiful man, and he would message me every day, and he would message me good morning every day. And it was really beautiful, right? And I really valued him because he made me believe that there are good men out there, like he had such a massive impact on me. And at the time that we connected, I was recovering from a relationship, and I decided that I don't want that traditional relationship anymore, right? Excuse me. And it was a real shame because I could have had something really beautiful with him, but I didn't want that anymore. But he helped me heal so much just by sending his loving messages every day, right? And it made me realize that, wow, if someone really wants to message you, they will message you every day. Yeah? They will message you good morning every day. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things I love about connecting with men is that that sweetness that comes through, right? So anyway, back to, where was I? I was talking about Oh, collapsing the paradigm, right? Yeah. So, and I was talking to the coffee guy who makes my coffee this morning, right? And he's like, we always talk about dating, and he's like, so what's going on? Like anything new? And I'm like, oh, like I said to him, I connected with a few guys, but they're like messaging me all the time, constantly all the time. And I thought, historically, I thought that's what I wanted. But as I've dissolved my paradigm, I've realized, no, that was my wounded ego that wanted that. That was my wounded ego that wanted that constant attention. But I don't really want that anymore. Sure, it's nice. But then, I connected with this one guy last week, and he was messaging me all day. And then when I didn't reply, he was like, you've disappeared. Where have you gone? And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, but this isn't kind of like the way that I connect. Like I'm more into, and me trying to explain what I'm into is really foreign to a lot of people. And they're like, what's that? Just casual then? And I'm like, well, it's not really casual. It's more independent. Anyway, so we parted ways in a really honourable way, right? But it was great for me because I was like, I don't want that anymore. I felt like I had won. I felt like I had evolved, okay? Because I don't want that. And then there was this other guy, and I was telling him there's this other guy, and he just wants sex, right? This one's casual sex. And I'm like, that's great for you. You know what you want, but that's not me, right? I need to have an emotional, a mental connection with someone, right? So I realized that, because for a long time, I was like, oh, should I go there? Nah, it's not really me. It's not my style, right? And he clarified it for me because I got this dirty feeling, right, about that concept, because I do believe when you sleep with someone, you become connected, right? And sex is sacred. And that's how it should be treated. Otherwise, it's just two bodies masturbating with each other, right? That's what it is. And I'm like, that's not really my cup of tea either. So collapsing this paradigm has cleared up a lot of things for me. It's made me really clear about what I want and what I do not want, okay? And you know what else is interesting that's happened? As I've been collapsing this, and I really think this is, you get tested. Your higher self tests you to see how committed you are. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had men send me dick pics. I had a man try and grope me. I had some sleazy things projected my way from men. Okay? And it was really interesting because I'm like, wow, why am I having these experiences? Yeah? And I was like, this is interesting because the more I connect with myself, the more I connect with my own energy, the more I activate my kundalini, the more in touch I am with my physical body and my sexual energy and my heart opening, the more these men think they can just throw themselves at me, or they're projecting onto me their ideas of who they think I am or what I want, right? I found that really fascinating because I'm dissolving this old paradigm. And this is, I'm like, those last 3 experiences that I just shared with you, I'm like, this is 1990s stuff. Who are these men, right? I'm like, what is going on here? So anyway, so I just observed it and I continued to collapse. And something amazing happened the other day because as I move through this, and my physical body, the relationship I have with my physical body is something that I have been working on for years, trying to love and accept my physical body as it is, okay? Always, right? And there's always something that I'd found that I didn't like about my physical body. And I grew up with this warped idea that I had to look a certain way. I had to be super skinny, and I look back on pictures in my 20s where I was super skinny and I used to think I was fat, right? And I was like, wow, how warped was my perception of myself, right? But as I dissolve this relationship paradigm and I keep coming back to me and I keep choosing me, right? I'm healing the relationship I have with my body, which is really profound, because I've been rejected many times. And every time I get rejected, I choose me, right? I come back to me and I choose myself more and more and more. And what happened was that I started to, I've been, really doing this deep work on my body lately. And I'm like, this body, you've really treated it badly. You attack it daily, you criticize it, you judge it, and you don't honor it. And you've this body has given you two beautiful children, right? And sure, at times you neglected, but it's still amazing, right? So the other day I got invited to my friend's apartment. She has a pool, right? And there's a lot of dancers that live in that apartment block, dancers with beautiful bodies. And there were 3 dancers sitting by the pool, right? And, I was already in the pool when they came down, and they took their clothes off, whatever. They're in their bikinis with their beautiful dancers' bodies, okay? With they had to have had some alterations done, right? But still beautiful bodies. And what usually happens in that moment, I'd be like, oh, wow. The old me used to go, wow, I want her legs and her hips and her boobs and her arms, and look at how skinny her face looks, and da-da-da. But in that moment, what happened for me was it made me love my own body more. I was like, oh, they have beautiful bodies, but I don't want those bodies anymore. I want my body. I love my body. It was such a profound experience for me, because I was like, wow, as I've been dissolving this paradigm that I used to live in, and I'm choosing myself more, and I'm connecting deeper with myself, I'm loving who I am even more. I'm loving this physical body and all of its imperfections as I've seen it imperfect. I'm loving that more, right? And I want to honor my body more. Does it make sense to everyone? And I was like, wow, who would have thought that me collapsing this old relationship paradigm that I have would help me drop into this deep state of love and appreciation for my own physical body. And just like that, me comparing myself to other women was gone, right? That physical part was gone. And I was really proud of myself in that moment, because I'm like, that was the gift from the universe. That was the surprise that I didn't see coming, right? Because whenever you do this inner work and you challenge yourself and you try to dissolve your wounded ego, you get gifted with a reward. And that was my reward. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to hide this body anymore. I'm not going to disrespect it anymore, right? So Sean's saying, because you're open and vulnerable. To some, that means no boundaries, but they're wrong. Yeah, so Sean's talking about the men that came on to me. And yeah, Sean, I think you're right, and when I'm not aggressive, but I'm also vocal now. And so for the guy who tried to grope me, I pushed him off and I said, stop, right? And then I left. I was at a friend's, I was somewhere where there was lots of people, right? So I wasn't alone with this person, but with the other person, I was like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And he's like, well, but, he's like, you said you don't want a relationship. And I'm like, well, just because I said I don't want a relationship, it doesn't mean that I'm looking for something sleazy either, right? And he was like, oh, okay, right? Now, I wasn't rude to him, but I was just vocal, And I think you're right with that. People assume a lot of things, and it's really important for us to be careful of how we assume. We assume things about certain people, and we're always so wrong, So anyway, that has been my experience. And as I continue to connect with men and I continue to explore my triggers when I'm in this mental turmoil, and when I'm courageous and I try to open my heart and express my feelings, and I try to connect with others, and sometimes I'm met and sometimes I'm not met, and when I am met it's really beautiful, and when I'm not met I have my triggers that show up, and they show up so I can heal them and clear them. And it's a process. It's not something you can do overnight, and when you get the triggers, if you can just sit with them and go into them and be like, wow, I feel ignored, or I feel like I'm not important enough, as some of the things that have come up for me, or I feel like I don't feel safe. Well, it's not the other person's job to make you feel safe. It's not the other person's job to make you feel important enough. It's not the other person's job to make you feel special. So then I go within and I do the inner work and I clear it, and it all comes back to my inner child. Yeah? And the more I choose me, instead of projecting back onto that person or cutting that person off or reacting, the more I choose me, the more empowered I become. The more I'm met. The more I open myself up to being met. Yeah? Does that make sense? Hi, Brianna. Hey, Sandy. So, hey, Justin. So, yeah. So, and it continues. The journey's continuing because I am not wanting to repeat what I've done before. I'm wanting something I've never had before, which means that I'm going to have to do things I've never done before. Which means I'm going to have to, when someone triggers you, they're showing you that you are shakeable. That you're not solid, that you can be easily affected by something. And that's not a judgment, it's just an invitation for you to grow more and evolve more. And so that's what I've been doing. And, I think just because someone isn't showing up in the way that you want them to show up, or just because someone isn't meeting you in the way that you want to be met, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they're not a good person for you, or that it can't turn into something beautiful. It just means that you should in your relationships, in your connections with new people, is build one step at a time, right? Build a platform, a really healthy, conscious friendship first before you do anything else. And you can be brave and you can open yourself up and you can be courageous and you can try and express. But when you're not met, maybe because the other person isn't ready or because they can't emotionally meet you there right now, it doesn't mean that it's all over, Red Rover. And it doesn't mean you're being rejected either. It just means that you've got to come back to choosing you and maybe pump the brakes a bit, cool the jets, slow down, right? It's a learning, and you've got to be really gentle with yourself as you move through it, right? Yeah. You've got to be really gentle with yourself, be really sweet with yourself, soften to you, and soften your projections onto other people, because they're often coming from the past, your past pain. And that's the key. The key is to not bring the pain of the past into your new connections. But, it's when we start relating with other that we start to really heal our relational trauma. And we can only really heal a certain amount of relational trauma on our own. And then other times we need a mirror who's going to reflect that back to us. So, hey, Billy. Hey, Reginda. Hey, Kelly. Billy, I'm just doing this live about collapsing relationship paradigms, and then I'm off to work. So, so guys, I hope that this live has helped you. I felt a very, very strong pull to share this today, because it's something that I'm deep in at the moment. And, it's so important to keep choosing yourself, even if you're married, even if you've been in a relationship for a really long time. Keep choosing yourself. Keep evolving, keep working through your relational trauma and your triggers and not projecting them onto your partner, right? And if you notice your partner projecting them onto you, have this conversation with them. Hey, what's going on for you right now? You seem really triggered. Have the conversation about being independent and evolved in a relationship. Because when two people are independent in a relationship, and you both honor and respect each other as individual people, then the third body of the relationship, the container you build together, is going to be one that's very rich and abundant and colorful, and it's going to last a long, long time. Yeah. Thanks, Billy. All right, so I'm going to leave it there, guys. Sending you all lots of love. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day or night, wherever you are in the world. And, yeah, I'll speak to you next time.